You're good? Oh yeah, there we go. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome here today. Well, it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I prepared a dad joke because I thought it was appropriate for today. So, what did the buffalo say to its son before it left for school? Bison. Bye, son. Yeah. It's truly a pleasure to be able to speak here again today. I don't do this often, but it's been getting easier over the years. It's been getting easier over the years. It's no longer something I fear or stress over, but something I kind of look forward to, especially if I've been going over something and learning something. I don't take a whole month to prepare. Actually, I spend just the week to prepare now. And I always wonder where God's going to take it, because when I'm preparing for the message 2 months ago, I was going to speak on something, but today I'm speaking on something completely different, and it changes like 5 or 6 or 7 times before then. So I always come up to this point where it's like, what is God going to have for me to say today? And this always makes me wonder what God will bring through it. And so I've titled this message today, God, I Wonder. Have you ever wondered before? Maybe you've wondered how airplanes fly. Maybe you wonder what makes the thunder sound when lightning strikes. Have you ever bought a book on how to do something, to learn how to do something? Have you ever YouTubed something? You probably have, to figure out how to do it. One thing I've really wondered this year is, why would God start a young adults group in the middle of a pandemic? It just seems so out of place, doesn't it? There's so many restrictions, avoiding gathering, but God's like, let's do this right now. Okay, let's go. I can tell you, even that it seems so out of place, God did use the young adults far beyond my imagination. We went through the books of Ruth and Esther in great detail throughout our whole experience. When we ended our Esther study, we watched a movie about Esther, and I've never ever enjoyed watching a Bible movie that much in my life before. I don't know why. It was so good. Maybe because we studied it, and I could pick out points like, oh, that's kind of cool, that's kind of cool. But I'd never ever enjoyed a movie that much, and I want to watch another one again because it was just that good. But if you've ever read the book of Esther before, never read it before, you really should. I could make this into like a 10-part study series, but I only have a few minutes today to cover it. Esther is a very unique book in the Bible, though. It is written like a Shakespearean play. It has 5 acts in it, and not once does it mention the word God or prayer. So it's a very unique book in the Bible. It's not often that we see God in a story in the Bible. It's not often that we see God in a story of the Bible. It's not often that we have to look for God in the story of the Bible, because he is so obviously there in the Bible and mentioned sometimes. But in this book, you actually look for him in certain subtle areas. I'm going to do a brief overview of the book of Esther and touch on some key points that I've found, I guess, to be more on point with my topic. So hold on to your seat and pay close attention, as we're able to explore what took our group 10 weeks to do, packed into maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So you can get home for lunch early today. Starting in Act 1, we are introduced to one of the main characters in this play, a king by the name of King Xerxes. King Xerxes is a wealthy man, as it is portrayed in this chapter. Loves his wine, he loves his food, loves to party, and this shows that loves to party so he can show his wealth and how wealthy and how awesome he is. At this point, he has only reigned for 3 years and is fairly new to the throne. With little too much in him and his ambition to show off all he has, he requests his queen to become Queen Vashti so they can admire her beauty, because he's got a whole bunch of people with him. But not all goes to plan for him. The queen refuses to come, and King Xerxes is furious with anger. With guidance from his advisors, he was told that she was to be sent away, for it was forbidden to disobey the king's commands, and replaced with another. After this, a decree was sent out that young, beautiful virgin women be brought to him throughout the land, and he would choose a replacement. Living in Susa was a Jew named Mordecai and his cousin Esther. We are now introduced to 2 new characters in this chapter as well, in this act. At some point in time, their parents or grandparents were forced to leave Jerusalem. Somewhere in all this, Esther had lost both her parents and is now being raised by her cousin Mordecai. But now with the king's decree, she's being taken away from Mordecai to possibly marry a non-Jew. What do you think the Jews would think of this? What do you think Esther is thinking in this moment? She has had everything been taken away from her. Her parents, now Mordecai, is being taken away from her, and now she has to go and marry a non-Jew and live in a palace where she'll never see her family again. Mordecai tells her to keep her heritage a secret while she goes into this place. But to no surprise to others, while she's in here, she is admired by everyone in the palace. Thus far, Esther becomes queen. Long story short. For a moment, I wonder, what would I do here? Think about it for a bit. What would you do here if you were Esther? I imagine that many people may hold a grudge towards the king, and this would have a massive effect on how you present yourself in the palace. I don't think an attitude with an ungrateful or like a grudged heart towards King Xerxes, if Esther had that, I don't think she would be able to get her position as queen, because that would have shown. Her upbringing through Mordecai is really showing here, and shows her great love and respect in any situation she is in. After all, she stands out to everyone. What's so different about Esther and all the others who were there, who were brought from 127 different provinces? There's a lot of women here. She stands out between all of them. Act 2, we're introduced to a man named Haman, one of King Xerxes' top nobles who despises Mordecai for refusing to bow down to him, resulting in plots. This would result in plots to kill the Jews in Persia. When this is all taking place, Esther had only been queen for 4 years. Actually, she's been queen for 4 years, which is a long time. The history behind this is pretty and crazy though, because Haman is an Amalekite and Mordecai is a Jew. When we go back further in the Old Testament, we see that in 1 Samuel chapter 15, God commands Saul to destroy all Amalekites and everything that belonged to them. But he did not obey this command and spared the king and a few good livestock. It states in Exodus that the Lord and his people will be at war with the Amalekites generation after generation. So it's interesting to see here that Haman, an Amalekite, is still having trouble with Mordecai, a Jew, is trying to take away everything they have. After this, when word spreads out to Mordecai that he hears about this, he weeps about his people being persecuted. Weeps with great expression and great emotion. And Esther hears about this. Hears about Mordecai weeping at the gate, which she is not allowed to go to, which results in her sending out her eunuch to go find out what's wrong. The message comes back to her, and it is very disheartening. Mordecai explains the decree to her and tells her that she must do something. Why else would you be in this position you are in right now? Can you imagine what's going through Esther's head in this moment? The king has even called for her for like months, or maybe a month, I'm not too sure, but it's been a long time. The king hasn't called for her. And if she goes there, she's risking her own life. If she confronts the king, she's risking her life. In fact, look what happened to the last queen who didn't do what the king had commanded her. And if the king doesn't even accept her presence, her punishment will be death. But Mordecai states in Esther chapter 4, verse 14, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther had a choice to make. She could ignore her calling to act, and deliverance would come from another place. But this did not mean she got off the hook. And just like Saul, her position may have been taken away from her. And even worse, she may have even lost her own life. In Act 3, when Act 3 comes in, the tables really start to turn here. After much thinking and fasting, Esther approaches the king. And maybe to her surprise, he accepts her presence. And oddly enough, he asks her what she would like and is willing to give her everything, even up to half his kingdom. Esther, in her brilliance or procrastination or fear, I don't know, has 2 banquets and only mentions her concern in the second one. In between all of these, there's this crazy story earlier that Mordecai saves the king's life years prior. He overhears these eunuchs planning to kill the king, and so he reveals this to the king, and the king deals with eunuchs, but Mordecai gets no recognition for it. But one night the king couldn't sleep, so he had his eunuch read his history book to him, which I guess if you read history, you fall asleep nicely, I don't know. But he reads his history book to him, and it's fascinating that he reads this part where Mordecai saves him. And he's like, hey, has anybody done anything for this guy, Mordecai? And it's like, nope. And then so King Xerxes then asks if anyone is around in the area, because he has to have advisors to tell him what to do all the time. So shockingly, Haman is in the courtyard. So Haman has to come in, and with some very misguiding, maybe misleading words, King asks Haman, what should the king do for the man who pleases him? And Haman, thinking it's for him, spits out this great gesture that he should be walked through the streets on the king's horse, wearing his royal robes, thinking who else but himself would please the king. But to his surprise, king says, go do this for Mordecai. So he walks Mordecai through the streets on a horse. That's probably one of my favorite parts of that story. But if you are on your edge of your seat right now with this story, you better hold on, because you might fall off, because we're not at the end yet. After all this, Mordecai just goes back, being humble. The humble person he is goes back to his daily tasks. Haman, on the other hand, earlier showed his family what a great person he was. And he is now complaining to his family about his recent event. The ones who encouraged him to put up a pole to kill Mordecai on earlier is now saying, it says this in this chapter afterwards. They encouraged him to put up a pole to kill Mordecai, but now they're saying this to him after he complains to them about all that he had to do for Mordecai. So chapter 6, verse 13 says, his advisors and his wife, Jairus, said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. I don't know about in these days, or this culture, but here it appears that even outside of the Jewish culture, people notice when whatever the Jews believe in was at work, and it could not be stopped. Continuing on to Act 4. After Esther reveals the truth of Haman's plan to the king, he is furious and still has no idea what to do. Earlier, we mentioned that Haman had built a pole for Mordecai to put onto him for not bowing down to him. But when I say bow down, I mean not in a worship way, but in a respect way. If I had to ask someone who studied with us in the book of Esther, what was your favorite verse? I don't know if Dawson, do you have the favorite verse, Pup? 7, verse 9. Yeah. Yep. In the movie, this is probably the best part. You could watch it. Because it's like everybody rushes in, he's so mad, and then this one eunuch, Harbona, comes in and says, attending there, said, a pole reaching to the height of 50 cubic stands by Haman's house. He had set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to the king earlier. And the king said, let's just impale him on it. What are we going to do with Haman? Let's impale him on it. It's kind of like a really weird thing, because he put the pole up for Mordecai, but he ended up himself on it. That is very strange. This may have also something to speak about Haman's character, because without any prompting, the eunuchs did this, showing that Haman's character is very self-centered, and possibly that nobody really liked him at all, other than the king, because he was good to the king to gain power. This act ends in the reversal of Act 2, though, because after Haman is killed, Mordecai is lifted up, and Haman is brought down. The king gives Mordecai his signet ring that Haman had, and I imagine, after much thought, a new decree comes out. It is written that the Jews may gather and defend themselves on this very day they were to be attacked. You see, a decree couldn't be undone, so they had to come up with a different way of doing this. So I guess they had the opportunity to defend themselves in this moment, on this one very day.
Act 5 shows us the greatness of the humbleness of Mordecai. On the day of the decree, which is now taking place about a year later, or roughly a year, which now looks like an organized civil war. The enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but quite the opposite happened that day. The Jews were able to totally destroy their enemies. And this time around, they did not take any plunder. It's almost like they're doing right what Saul had done wrong. When the days of fighting were done, they partied and started a new holiday. It is still celebrated today in Jerusalem. This is the end of the story. Now, if you've fallen off your seat, it's time to get back up onto your seat. But I skipped a boat ton of this stuff. Lots of small details that we got through. I can't cover it all in a whole short message, but if you'd like to go through the 10-part series with us, we actually have a podcast, and you could follow that. And it is quite interesting, I think. I don't listen to it because I can't listen to my own voice. So feel free to listen to it. It's on our church website. It's on there. If you have trouble finding it, just ask me. We'll figure it out. But if you haven't noticed, as I'm going through this whole story of Esther, I've really tried really hard not to mention God once. But I can almost guarantee you that in your mind, you were like, wow, God was here with Esther, or with the Jewish people, or in these certain events, or in this area. God was working. The greatest thing about it is that you came here today to listen and to learn more about who God is and what he is and what he has for you in your own life. I think this book has a lot to teach us about searching for God through everything in our daily lives. For example, Esther lost her parents. She was forced away from her cousin, Mordecai, to marry the king of Persia, and to her Jewish heritage, that wouldn't look so good. Do you ever think that Esther thought, God, why? Why is this happening to me? I do not think God wanted her to lose her parents or be forced away from her home, but he's used all these awful things to make something amazing happen. He saved all the Jews through Esther. Last week, I really like that Mark spoke about gratitude. I'm just going to it really ties in well with what I have to say today. How often do we go, God, why? Why are you doing this to me? Or why is this happening? Not that this is a bad question to ask, but so often we focus on the things God has not done for us that we forget what he has done. With this perspective, we are trying to love our lives live our lives the way we want to live them, and go about them like Haman. We may be blind to the fact that we do not see what's really going on. Haman's family saw what was going on. Haman did not. If we look at Esther, she could have walked into this whole thing with a bitter heart towards the king and treated him like all of this was his fault. But she did not do that. Something was different about her. Everyone who had seen her was admiring who she was. You see, I think if you live your life the way God has called you to, people will do the same thing to you. They'll see something different in you and say, what is that in your life? Why are you so much different? And this is what Esther was doing. Just like Esther was not in the position she wanted to be in, but she was walking with the Lord and grateful for what she had, for what he had done for her in her life, when she had every right to be ungrateful for anything that had happened. I don't know where you're at. I don't know what struggles you face on a daily basis. And I certainly don't have the answers of what will make it go away. But have you ever stopped and looked and asked God, what are you doing and how can I help? He may not have an answer for you. Esther didn't know what God would use her 4 years later after being queen. Take a moment of time to think and be thankful for what God has done in your life. Look around to see where you can find God working in. He works in small corners, some that you may miss if you're just looking to find him in the big picture. Or if you're looking for things he hasn't done yet. Your mood may just end up changing. The way you walk, maybe even the way you live. If you find yourself stuck and unsure what to do, I would encourage you to first spend time in prayer and seeking what God is doing, and be grateful for what he has, grateful for it instead of saying, God hasn't done this or this or this yet. We live in a world full of sin, and bad things will happen all the time, guaranteed. But we have hope in it all, because we follow a God that is willing to use our brokenness to bring us back and glorify him. Isn't that crazy? Who takes the broken instead of something that isn't broken and uses that? I'm sure you guys have had a broken tool before. Depending on the price of it, you probably just throw it away, buy another one. Depending on the price, obviously. But you know what? Jesus paid the ultimate price for you and for me to fix our brokenness. Just like the book of Esther, he taught me to look for God at work in the good and the bad, to be grateful for the things he has given already and not the things he hasn't. Let's take some time today and look around at the good things God has done and watch and work towards the good things he will do. Because he will call on you one day to be bold. Let's not miss out on opportunities while we're waiting for the Lord to do something that we want. Let's actually look for what the Lord is doing and walk with him in that. The Lord is willing to work with you. Are you willing to work with the Lord? Bow with me on a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. I thank you that we can gather together. I thank you that for our government and for all the restrictions that are slowly lifting up, God. God, I pray for your presence in everyone's lives, and for the struggles that people go through. Father, help us to look for you, look for your light and look for your work. Help us to follow you in your path the way you want us to go, Father. In your heavenly name, amen. I'd like to invite the band up now.